Welcome to the At the Coalface podcast with your host, Jason Greenwood. This podcast is all about what it's really like in the trenches of digital and e-commerce. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the pod. I have Max Flannery from Adgile Media Group with me here today to talk about some super exciting stuff. Welcome, Max.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. I feel like you got conscripted into this, hopefully not against your will, from Tom Shea from your company as well. And he was like, I think he obviously knew about my podcast. He knew about me from LinkedIn. We were connected on LinkedIn, and he reached out and put your name forward as coming on the podcast to talk about what you guys do. And it sounds super exciting.
Yeah, definitely not against my will. Very happy to be here. But in typical startup fashion, we both call on each other to jump in when we need extra hands. And his calendar was filling up pretty quickly. So happy to be his second option.
Brilliant. Well, it's good to have you here. Now, you guys are working in a really what I consider an emerging and very dynamic space in relation to digital. And that is what I call that converged physical digital media, advertising, and analytics space. And we see this absolutely exploding. I'll give you some of my thoughts around this whole space, but that's the space I consider you guys playing in. Is that how you would describe what you guys do as well?
Yeah, I think so. At a high level, our form of marketing is considered out-of-home advertising, but there's so much more. It's so much more strategy that we see behind the reason that we chose the format that we did to pursue. And you said it, we would not have started this business if we didn't have the availability or ability to have a high level of data attribution, measurement, ROI tracking behind everything we're doing. I would say that traditionally, the description of just out-of-home advertising is a bit of doesn't really capture all of the value prop that we believe we're driving here.
Love that. And even Google's getting in on the action of this space. If we look back as recently as late August, basically just over a month ago here, Google announced that they were launching their what they call DOOH, or digital out-of-home advertising, on its display and video 360 ad planning tool, which basically allows marketers to create multi-platform campaigns in its ecosystem across both all of its digital channels as well as all of its physical channels. So like bus shelters and digital screens and digital marketing on footpaths and things like that. So we see Google getting heavily into this. And even over a year ago, I had the guys from Postalytics on the podcast, where what they do is they bring the concept of standard media or direct mail marketing through postcards and direct mail, and they've digitalized that in such a way that you can integrate that experience into your marketing automation workflows in tools like Klaviyo and other marketing automation platforms, so that you can mix and match your, for example, email marketing, your SMS marketing, and your physical mail marketing as part of one seamless workflow. So we are seeing this kind of combination of digital, physical, maybe what some would call legacy marketing models or legacy marketing and media channels, and infusing them with digital intelligence and digital capabilities and digital workflows and analytics that all of a sudden have effectively made these more traditional media formats sexy again.
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of big companies get into the space. You mentioned what Google's doing, but a handful of years ago, Google Ventures was backing the guys over at Firefly, which is doing taxi tops, but on Ubers. And now Uber has taken that whole business type of in-house and is projecting over $1 billion of annual revenue that they hope to see out of that aspect of their business. Really is promising. I think all of these updates have come since Tom and I started the first version of this business back in 2018. But yeah, I'd be lying if I said that seeing those big players get into the space was just additional validation and encouragement that we really think we're on to.
Love it. Now, before we get into your specific offering, your specific technology, and what you guys do, let's talk a little bit about your background, because you come from effectively a business consulting, management consulting background at Deloitte. you've got a business background, got a BS in accounting and finance from Miami University. So you really come from this kind of hardcore business background. And how, when you left Deloitte, you decided to co-found Adgile Media Group. How did you decide that this was a space where you said, hey, there's a gap in the market here. We see huge opportunities here. Maybe we're a little bit early, but we'd rather be early than late to this space because all the big players aren't really here yet. How did you decide that this was an area that you wanted to specialize in?
Yeah, both Tom and I do not have the traditional marketer's background at all. But I think that when we first met, it was very clear to us early on that we're both entrepreneurs at heart. We were telling stories about small businesses that him and I used to run growing up. And funny enough, there was some overlap in what those were, whether it was standing in line for tickets to a certain concert and then reselling them around your hometown or sports game, etc. A lot of similarities in our background. As far as more formal training, as you mentioned, mine is in finance and accounting, his being in computer science. As far as when I graduated, I knew that I wanted to start my own thing eventually. I went to Deloitte, chose management consulting, mostly because I knew that it was going to be a fantastic training ground, getting an inside look into a number of different companies, working on a number of different projects, really just being trained at a high world-class level on how to do business. But it was pretty early on after graduation that I started looking for that next business idea, and probably went through 20 or more with some of my close, similarly minded friends. The way that Adgile was originally in February of 2018 with a fairly different business model. I was sitting in an Uber in downtown Chicago, and a truck in front of me had a digital screen on the back of it that was flashing ads fairly quickly with seemingly little logic. Something like Applebee's, Pepsi, Lay's, Applebee's, Pepsi, Lay's. And I thought that was pretty interesting because I was stuck in traffic and it was so close and intimate to me. I couldn't look away. It was capturing your attention much more seemingly so than a billboard was. You can't really take your eyes off the road especially if you're the driver there. So I looked up with the closest Applebee's location, and it was over an hour and a half away. And I thought that seems like an interesting form of advertising, but it should be more intelligent. So I, funny enough, met Tom that following weekend. He had just moved to Chicago from Los Angeles. We were introduced by a friend of a friend. I was working on the business model, and he said that he could be the technical co-founder to actually program that platform. So essentially for 2.5 years, we were installing digital, weatherproof, vandal-proof, almost TV screens on the back of semi-trucks that were traveling from like Chicago to LA. And these advertisements would change their advertising based on where the truck was traveling and the time of day, et cetera. So in Indiana, if it was passing exit 5 at lunchtime, it might advertise for Chipotle or McDonald's, and then pass the exit and advertise for the following businesses off the following exit. At nighttime, it could be Applebee's or a Holiday Inn. So I thought it was a pretty compelling form of advertising. Again, I didn't know anything about marketing or advertising at the time. It just seemed something that should exist. People are paying for billboards off to the side of the road, so why not pay for something that is more intelligent and closer to the audience, being the driver who's on the road. So Tom and I worked on that for about 2 years. We went through the University of Chicago New Venture Challenge, where we were blessed to have very helpful mentors and venture capitalists to give us advice on this. We thought we were the favorites to win the competition, and we're given the feedback very late that while they think that it's a promising format, there is no proof that advertisers want to advertise on trucks at all. So before you spend all this money and make it digital and intelligent, they asked us to take the business idea, go prove that there is advertiser demand on trucks. And if we could prove that, then we could come back and have the conversation of whether or not they would give us that investment to take it the next step further and take that intelligent step, like I mentioned. So
and you bill yourself, like on your website, you say, basically, if I go to the advertiser section of your website, you're pretty clear. Your value prop or your call to action is pretty darn clear. You basically say, we're a performance-driven out-of-home advertising business. We blanket your target market with your ads on our fleet of branded last mile delivery trucks that travel where your audience does. And you've got the map of the United States here, and you've got dotted operations right through pretty much the most of the United States, except for maybe perhaps the northern part of the United States, which is a little bit sparse still. But what you talk about here, you talk about some of the specific things that you guys deliver: a 300% average ROI for each dollar spent on an agile campaign, 4x more effective per dollar than billboard ads, which kind of we can dive into these a little bit more and how you arrived at some of these stats. But 600% more likely to click on your brand's digital advertisement after seeing your ad on an agile vehicle. But what I find interesting, probably even more so than some of the stats, is some of the claims that you make around your proprietary technology and some of the things that you do. And you say we've got demonstrable ROI through agile, state-of-the-art audited technology. It tracks not only how many people saw your campaign, but also how many converted into a sale. Now, there's a whole bunch more claims here about your tech, and you talk about it in a little more detail. But maybe we dive into that first thing there, because I'd love to better understand how you guys, if these are static, for example, truck sides that have static campaigns on them, then from there, how do you guys start to pull out some of this digitalized analytics out of these type of campaigns?
Sure. Before we go there, I just want to clarify what the business I just described of version 1 of the business. Want to make sure it's clear of what the business model is now. So we picked up from Chicago after getting that feedback, brought the business to New York City, and decided, okay, instead of these trucks that are going over the road, highway, from Chicago or New York to LA, across the country, we're just going to focus on ones that are last mile. Like Bob's Fish Delivery might be operating a 26-foot box truck that's traveling around Manhattan. The truck sleeps in Manhattan, wakes up in Manhattan. It's always in Manhattan. It's taking fairly consistent routes. That seemed like an easier place to start than tracking a bunch of trucks that are in Chicago one day, LA the next. When the ad is no longer changing based on the time and location, which was our initial idea, when we no longer have that power, then we need to have some certainty in where that vehicle is going. So that is what we're talking about now. Delivery vehicles that are delivering fish or beverage or bread to bars, restaurants, grocery stores, etc. We are wrapping those on behalf of brands who essentially were making the trucks on the road mobile billboards as they travel their business as usual route. Once we started and took that to market, it was very clear to us that a lot of the big brands in the market are the ones that buy the billboards, Pepsi, T-Mobile, et cetera. And they're just looking to have your brand in front of them. But in order to get to that level, you need to build up a portfolio of brands that are a little smaller than them, more challenger brands that you did good work for first before some of the biggest companies in the world are going to take a risk on your offering. So we started off in this medium to small e-commerce CPG space, and many of them had never done out-of-home advertising before. And they're used to spending the vast majority of their marketing budget on Instagram or Facebook and getting those very clear ROI metrics back of how effective that spend was. Really early on, it was clear to us that even though the digital aspect of our physical ad changed, it's now static, we still needed to have the tech enablement that is able to track the effectiveness of our real world campaign and in order to attract these digitally or online native brands. So we went through quite a few iterations of how to accomplish that. I do want to clarify one thing, which is that there have been a number of advancements in that space since we started the company, and our data measurement capabilities is no longer proprietary. And I think that for many in the space, it is not. There are a few big players that are fighting over who is going to be the gold standard of out-of-home advertising measurement. But we pretty early on decided that wasn't a space that we thought we were going to be able to win. There was quite a lot of venture capital money going into it, and we didn't think that deep tech measurement aspect was our real expertise. Our expertise was more in locking up the best inventory that is going to be what we think a next pretty substantial advertising platform, that being these trucks that are traveling in high density, high population areas. So I wanted to give that background a little bit. I think going back to your question was just how are you tracking the effectiveness of these advertisements in order to make these claims, and happy to go into that. If our trucks are traveling around Manhattan, our data partner is aggregating anonymous mobile phone locations that many mobile phone apps are reselling. An app like the Weather Channel, if you're sharing your location with it, it might be selling your location. We don't know in that situation that it's Jason. We know that all we know is that's phone 123 was on the corner of Fifth Avenue at a certain time. Our tech platform then cross-references those locations, anonymous locations, with the location of our truck, determine how many people were within an area that was high likelihood that they saw the advertisement. And based on that, we count that as a view. And then that same phone 123 identifier can be tracked to determine whether or not that then visited a certain website. Again, not knowing anything personally identifiable, just knowing that a phone was on the sidewalk when our truck passed and then went to that website. And that is the methodology behind us claiming that we drove one person to the advertiser's site because of our campaign.
Yeah, so I totally get that. So you might say, okay, we know phone 123 was within 50 meters. I don't know what the radius around your vehicles you consider to be highly likely to have viewed the ad. I don't know, it's 50 meters, 100 meters, 200 meters. I don't know how accurate positioning of the effectively the GPS unit on the vehicle. And I'm guessing that you basically any vehicle owner that you work with, you give them the tracking device that is part of the licensed tracking technology that you've licensed from that third party tracking technology provider. And then I guess the piece here where it says, but also how many converted into a sale. So I guess whilst you might know who converted into a site visit, or how many converted into a site visit, but you don't actually follow that through all the way through to a sale because there is no PII or personally identifying information to then say, okay, phone 123 turned into a sale. So that piece feels like it might be a little bit of a stretch. Would that be accurate?
Nope. We actually when we work with an advertiser, we install a pixel on the welcome page and the checkout in the confirmation page of their site. So if phone 123 went to the welcome page, we know that they visited, and the only way you can get from the welcome page to the confirmation page is if you make some sort of purchase.
Right.
Once phone 123 is at the page where it says sale confirmed, in that situation, we don't know what that user bought. It could have been the smallest or most expensive item or a mix between the two. But we do know that's a sale. So we can make some claims based on how many sales our format drives.
Yeah. And I guess at that point, you'll at least know phone 123 saw the order success page pixel.
Yep, totally.
Great. Well, fantastic. I mean, that certainly brings a level of accountability and trackability to physical media that we don't get in other ways. And I'm guessing that because for now, your ads have moved to more of this static model truck sides that, I don't know, I'm guessing that an ad might be on a truck and run for a 30-day window or something like that, almost like a billboard, 30, 60-day, 90-day window, whatever it might be. And you're tracking them for the entire time that they've purchased to be located, effectively rented that billboard space, that moving billboard space. And in fact, we used to see, I don't know how much you see this anymore, but we used to see that there was actually billboard trucks and trailers. That's all they did. They were like a Ford F-150 with a trailer behind it with a triangular, massive, giant billboard on it. And they would just drive around town with the ad pulled behind the vehicle, and they would actually seek out traffic to be stuck in because they were then more static and more people would see them because they weren't moving. They were actually statically locked in traffic. So people on footpaths and in vehicles stuck in traffic around them would actually see these billboards. So I don't know how often that happens anymore now that you guys have come along, and I'm presumably there's other companies that do similar things. I'm guessing that there's not as much of a need for these rolling billboards anymore because effectively you can turn any large physical space on a truck into a rolling billboard.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring that up. So a couple of things. In the United States, those definitely still do exist in cities like Las Vegas, and I see them at nighttime in Chicago. In New York, they are a little bit more sparse, and that's mainly because the city of New York has banned them or any vehicle that is only on the road for the purpose of advertising for exactly what you said, is that they see that as increasing traffic and almost seeking out traffic for the sake of advertising. So we saw this as a great opportunity and another thing that I'll clarify between the difference between us and them is they are able to get a lot more specific on where that ad is shown. when we partner with, I'm going to use Bob's Fish Delivery again, he knows that he needs to make deliveries throughout the day, and that's what's driving the revenue of his business. And those other formats are just driving wherever the advertiser wants exposure. So there definitely are situations where that vehicle that is solely on the road for the purposes of advertising can be more appealing than us for brands. Some have come to us wanting to drive around a given conference or the Super Bowl for 2 days or something like that, and we can't really deliver on that. So we refer them to some of our friends in the industry that are doing more of the form of advertising that you're speaking about. But with that specificity, with the fact that you have to hire someone to drive this vehicle only for the sake of advertising, and we just have to pay someone who's already on the road to put different imaging on the side of their vehicle, we're coming in at a significantly lower price point. I see those mobile billboards as a much different product. I think that we are making the space more accessible to many more brands. That's why we work with so many of these e-commerce companies. I don't picture any of them or many of them being in the market for this type of advertising if it came with the high price point of having to rent a vehicle and a driver for the sole purpose of advertising with you. Overall, I think in summary, that format still exists, but we think the price point is a big differentiator in what makes us different or more beneficial for some of these brands.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I immediately when you started talking, I was thinking, I'm guessing the price points between them and you are dramatically different. So you guys offer a pretty compelling offering completely independent of what they do. So that makes complete sense. Now, two other things that leapt out at me here, and I'd love to maybe dig into this a little bit deeper, is that you say there's two things here. One is that digital advertisements enjoy a 300% increase in effectiveness when paired with Adgile placements. Then retargeting your out-of-home audience with ads on digital platforms result in a 6 times higher click-through rates, presumably because they even subconsciously may have seen an ad on the road, and then all of a sudden now we're able to effectively cookie them because of this pixel. We're now able to follow them around with retargeting. But I also think that there's probably an additional piece to this from an attribution perspective, that if you guys integrated with something like Northbeam or Triple Whale or any of the attribution focused digital platforms, that I think that would potentially add even more value for these primarily digital native brands or D2C brands that are really heavy into their attribution modeling and therefore can better track multi-touch attribution. Is that something that you guys have gotten involved in or have considered, is talking to the guys like at Northbeam or Triple Whale so that you can get your attribution integrated tightly within their attribution platforms?
Yeah, I believe so. I am familiar with those companies, and I believe that we've been in some preliminary conversations of having some sort of partnership. I think that we're working right now to try and find out who the right company to work with on that type of beta test would be. But yeah, to touch more on the retargeting piece of things, essentially going back to the example that we were giving earlier, once we know that phone 123 was exposed to our advertisement, we can retarget them on connected TV, paid social, banner ads, mobile native, etc., with data from that same advertiser that was leveraging our trucks. And it does a couple of things. One, it makes it seem like that advertiser is everywhere, right? Or whether it's a good thing or not, it makes it seem like they're following you. But that is intentional because the rule of advertising is it's going to take about 7 to 9 touches with a customer before being able to transition them, or a potential customer before being able to transition them into a paid customer. So that it allows brands to get a lot more specific and further down the marketing funnel a lot quicker when we can serve as that quick top of funnel exposure, and then immediately after, in the next 7 to 14 days, retarget them with ads on digital and hopefully pull them down. So what we've seen as far as click-through rates on those retargeted ads is that click-through rate is about 8.5 times higher than the audience if the audience was just exposed to those digital ads without seeing out of home or a truck side advertisement first. Yeah, definitely shows that this mix of out of home advertising and digital advertising really makes both formats more effective.
And are you finding also that, let's say you're dealing with an omni-channel retailer that has physical stores and has a really strong digital presence, are you finding that they want to work with you, for example, within a radius of some of their physical stores, so that the customer has the option right in the moment. Sure, we can market to them that we have this online presence and we can drive them there to complete the transaction right there on the mobile phone. Or we're also being able to drive this experiential part, which says, hey, we've got a store, close to where you are right now, pop in. Maybe they even within a certain geography of their physical stores, they may want to engage with you for ad creative that points out their local store to where that'll be local to that particular vehicle at that time. Are you finding that those omni-channel retailers are wanting to try to leverage this in both an online and an offline way to drive traffic in store and drive traffic online? Or is this primarily for either pure plays or businesses that are really trying to drive significant additional online traffic?
Definitely not to just one or the other. I'm glad you brought this up because it's a pretty interesting story. When we launched this business, we were just trying to find anyone that would give us the time of day to allow us to advertise with them. We were essentially giving away truckside ads for free in an effort to prove the concept. My co-founder Tom's older sister, Katie Shea, is a venture capitalist in New York, and she was very helpful in introducing us to some of her portfolio companies that might be interested in taking us up on that offer. And we did a couple 3-month campaigns for companies like Topicals or Gia, and which were primarily pure play online companies at the time, but were getting large enough that they were about considering a retail presence, and they do have those now. And so that was a complete accident on our end. But I think that we didn't plan for e-commerce or CPG to be our bread and butter. But when we saw that they were interested in working with us, we obviously jumped at the opportunity, and it was their first time doing any sort of out of home. And to this day, over 2 years later, they are still some of our most loyal customers, continually renewing their campaigns, and have been with us from day one. And I remember going to them asking, you're not doing billboards. We're not giving you this for free anymore. You're paying. They still get a good discount for being there from day one, but you're still paying for it, but you're not doing any other forms of out of home. What makes you so loyal to truckside advertising? It was a really interesting response. And it said that when people see Adgile Media Group trucks, if we buy a billboard, everyone knows that we paid for an ad. But when people see our brand advertising on 10 trucks across Manhattan, they think that those trucks are actually delivering our product. When in reality, the trucks that we're working with are delivering bread to restaurants. They might think that if it has a Topicals ad on it, it is full of women's skincare products. And that makes their brands look like they have a real world presence, look like they're very successful moving all this product. And then human psychology kicks in, herd mentality type thing kicks in of who is this brand? How are they delivering so much product? All my neighbors must be using it. What am I missing out on? Let me try it. So I think that was really the aha moment of, okay, this is more than just an option between us or a billboard, and we're going to be cheaper. It is an intentional strategy that many of these companies have to make them look larger and more reliable than they really are. And a lot of that value comes when they're trying to get into retail and trying to have that real world presence and trying to take that next step from a pure play e-commerce company. So we really, once we heard that feedback, have really just leaned in hard to the e-commerce space, have grown substantially in that space. And to take it a step further, I think that one thing that really is helpful in separating us from other out-of-home players or other truckside players is our deep inventory pool that we're able to select from when designing a campaign. We have partnerships with some of the largest trucking companies on an exclusive basis in the country, and so giving us access to over 100,000 vehicles nationwide. And what that allows us to do is not only identify which truck in each market is the most performant. So we quickly learned also that a lot of these trucks spend a lot of their time in loading docks or parking lots or back alleys where they're not being seen much. So not all trucks are created equal, and you need a big inventory pool and a measurement platform to be able to determine which are the best for advertising's sake. But then once you determine that pool, you need to know, okay, where are all of these traveling? and you need to have a lot to choose from to get very specific in where these brands want to advertise. So we have had some recent clients come to us after just getting into Sephora or Whole Foods, and they say that they see this as a way to significantly help drive the sell-through of their brand in those retail locations. So we will geofence all of those locations, cross-reference that with our inventory fleet, and determine which vehicles spend the most amount of time in close proximity to those retail locations, making that value prop that I spoke about earlier about how people think it's delivering the brand's product, takes it to a whole nother level when that brand is sitting outside of a Whole Foods that sells that product. And then we identify the people who are inside the Whole Foods and retarget them on digital ads. It is this one-stop shop, run the gamut of value prop for these companies that are getting into retail and really want to push that home to take their brand to the next level.
Man, this opens up a whole new line of thinking in my mind. You know how you said that some brands, they see this as an opportunity, even if they're pure play, to make themselves look much bigger than they are, because all of a sudden, if you see all these semi trucks or these large lorries driving around a city with this brand on it, then you think, my God, these guys must be massive because they're moving a hell of a lot of product around in their trucks. So I understand that psychology, but it also becomes a massive selling point if a D2C brand, for example, decides to try to get into the B2B/wholesale game. They're working with other retailers. What an absolutely massive selling point to be able to bring to the table and say, we're not only supplying you amazing products that we think are going to sell really well in your physical retail spaces, but we're going to help drive additional traffic to your store through marketing that we're already doing. So in other words, we're going to reposition some of our marketing spend with Adgile that maybe, for example, was in areas where we have high concentrations of our likely D2C customers. We're now going to reorientate and redeploy some of that spend to help, now that you're a retail partner of ours, even though we're not setting up our own physical retail stores perhaps yet or whatever, and we're not going D2C through physical retail, you are effectively our retail channel. We're going to, in order to add additional value to you carrying our product, we're now going to reorientate some of our ad spend to driving in-store traffic to you to buy our product. And so obviously there's opportunities to cross-sell, to upsell, to sell other items when they're in store with you. So we're in general driving additional traffic to your store with the aim of selling more of our product, of course, but there is the opportunity for you to sell more product in general through our advertising spend, which we're using to drive in-store traffic for you. So this feels like a massive selling point for brands that are trying to break into the wholesale market, trying to break into the resale market, trying to establish B2B routes to market. This feels like a pretty compelling additional string to the bow when they're doing a pitch to a major retail partner. If they can say, hey, we've been running these ads for X number of days or months or years, and here's the kind of returns we've been getting through our D2C channel, i.e. our website, but this proves the effectiveness of the channel, and we're going to redeploy some of this spend to help drive traffic to your stores. This feels like a seriously important value proposition to bring to the distribution table.
Yeah, that's definitely our hope. I don't think that advertising trying to push sell-through has been common or undoable in the past. Buy our product at Whole Foods, buy our product at Target on TV commercials or maybe even billboards. But for many of the brands we're talking about, those formats are not affordable or not the best spend of their ROI. So I think that if we were, one of the first things that we thought of is, if you're a brand that just got into Whole Foods, you're in 10 locations across Manhattan. Okay, well, that's going to be 10 different billboards that are in close proximity. But what if you could find one truck that over the course of the day got in close proximity to all of those? But I'm totally with you on the second, more data-centric side of what we're doing. We talked about retargeting the audience that was just exposed to the truck side advertisement, pushing that viewer further down the marketing funnel quickly. But another thing that we've been doing is nothing to do with trucks, just retargeting the people who we know are at the Whole Foods more than 3 times a month or whatever it might be. We can deliver to these brands a population for digital advertising that they know are loyal shoppers at the retail locations that their brand just got into. So I think the moral of what we're trying to accomplish is find the most efficient way for these brands to push sell through in these retail stores as quickly as possible when that time is right for them. And I think that we've seen a good amount of success here. I think that launch in retail is a pretty exciting thing for a lot of brands. They have obviously already had some sort of success with the early adopters online, but then having the mix of that most passionate fan base that was early in and very loyal to your company, I'm sure all of them are going to start shopping at Whole Foods, or if that's the example we're going to, once that brand is sold there. And then we help try and get that next step of kind of the fast followers to join in on that party as well.
Now, what you guys effectively are, from my perspective, is a marketplace, right? You have the inventory through your partners, your inventory partners, and so you're providing the supply side and you're supplying the demand side. So you're matching up buyers and sellers of inventory. And so do you guys see yourselves eventually trying to move into a full-blown, like, for example, mobile app-driven marketplace whereby, you know what, I'm guessing that price discovery for certain things and filtering the inventory by specific rules and all that sort of stuff. Sure, you guys do that internally, and it's obviously part of your service engagement with advertisers that you perhaps have account managers or whatever, however it is you run your operations, that help to match up and get a brief from an advertiser, help to get the creative created and placed on these vehicles because they are static for the window of time that they're operating, et cetera, et cetera. But do you envisage a future whereby you build up almost like a marketplace, like an Amazon, like an eBay, where you digitally connect the advertiser with the inventory and it's almost hands off from your perspective and it's all digitally driven? And or do you see a future where when you have that marketplace, that also justifies going back to that original model of yours where we have now digital billboards on the sides of these vehicles where the digital creative that's created by these brands can be beamed up effectively in near real time to these vehicles, and therefore now instead of having static ads, we have ads that can run at specific times of the day and we can swap them out, and now we have automated price discovery so that the inventory can maximize their return on investment, but also the advertisers can start to be really discreet and specific about when they run their ads, how long they run their ads for. And we get into a bidding scenario, almost like a PPC type of bidding scenario for this inventory to maximize the deployment of the inventory, but also maximize return on investment for the advertisers. So it feels like that ultimately, when you guys get to that scale, that feels like a very natural next step for you guys.
Yeah, we've talked about different types of dashboards that are more client facing, whether it's in the asset selection process or mid campaign or post, whatever it might be. I think that is something we'd be interested in longer term. In the short term, we are just making sure that we're finding the best assets, delivering the highest quality of product for these early customers to make sure that this is an effective format, as effective as we think it is, and we can take our company to the next level. But I totally agree with what you're saying about getting back to that original digital product. I know that vision will always be Tom and I's first baby, and we have always said that we would like to get back there in some form or fashion. I don't think that anytime soon it would be focused on those over the road trucks that we initially were working on, just due to the fact that we're learning how much smaller the number of eyeballs is of the vehicles that are sitting on a highway behind a semi truck compared to the people on the sidewalk that a last mile delivery truck travels. I think that we would likely keep focused on the last mile space, but I would love to get it back to static because, as you said, back to digital, because as you said, it opens up for not only for us, but for the advertisers as well. In that exact example we were just talking about one advertiser just got into Whole Foods and one advertiser just got into Sephora. If we have 100 trucks that are traveling around Manhattan, we could just program all of them to advertise for company A when they're around Whole Foods and company B when they're around Sephora. And then you get some larger blue chip company that just wants high level brand awareness to fill in the cracks in other areas around the market when at a much lower CPM compared to those more targeted ones. So I really think that I'm hopeful that we can find a way to get back there eventually. But again, right now we're focused on getting the current model off the ground and making sure that we spread the word about these capabilities to make this a pretty mainstream part of many brands' media mix.
Awesome. And when do you plan, or do you plan to expand outside of the United States? And just for everybody that wants to know, Adgile is ADG, so Adgile, ADGILE.co. That's the website. Clearly, you're focused on the United States today. Do you have plans to expand outside of the United States at any stage? Maybe Canada, maybe Mexico, because those are closest to your home bases? Or do you feel like you've got your hands full for the foreseeable in the United States for now? And then secondarily, how do you prefer people get a hold of you? Do you prefer they go to your website? Do they prefer that they connect with you on LinkedIn? So those are the final key questions I think I have about what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I mean, we're fortunate with some of our very large trucking partnerships that it's not out of the question for us to get inventory in other markets currently. We have entertained that for a couple brands that were interested in some markets in Europe or Canada. I think that the size would need to make sense for us. It will be a little bit larger of a lift. I think it just didn't make sense for the couple of brands we had talked to, just the size of the campaign they were going for. But if we do have those intentions longer term, and there's nothing stopping us from doing that in the shorter term. Please don't hesitate to reach out if that is something of interest. As far as getting in touch goes, website contact us form is a great way to do it. Our website is a little bit under construction right now. LinkedIn request. My name is Max Flannery, or just an email. My email is max@adgile.co.
Awesome stuff. Listen, thank you so much for sharing what's happening in this kind of almost digital out of home space with digital analytics integration and remarketing, retargeting. And clearly this space is a very fast moving and dynamic space. When Google effectively validates your business idea through some of the moves that they're making, when some of the other traditional media players start to integrate their technology and their placements into digital workflows like postcards, like direct mail, and integrating those into full-blown marketing automation workflows. I think when you see these other forms of validation in adjacent industries to yours, that is a really big resounding stamp of approval, I would say. And it sounds like you guys are doing some pretty groundbreaking stuff, and particularly around, I like your point about in securing premium inventory. It's like the difference between a billboard that's stuck between a meter width gap between two buildings and your billboard being on the front of the Macy's building, right at the corner of Fifth Avenue in New York or whatever. In all of these out-of-home advertising locations, there are levels of premium placements versus non-premium placements, and I think if you can continue to monopolize the best inventory, then that's going to give you guys a massive leg up, and it sounds like it already has. So that's really super interesting as part of your overarching business model. It's that first mover advantage, right? How can we suck up and try to, in the best way we can, monopolize the best inventory so that we can present that best inventory to our customers at any given point in time. So I really do like that model. Now we're at the point of the pod where I get to turn the microphone over to you, Max, and you get to ask me one question, any question you like. Doesn't have to be about business, can be about business, can be about personal, can be anything you like. So Max Flannery from Adgile, microphone over to you.
Appreciate that. And hopefully this isn't too naive of a question given your expertise in the space and the audience. But my experience in the e-commerce space has been so fairly brief, and not a space that I really expected to get to given my background, which we talked about at the beginning of the podcast. But would love to hear, given your experience in this space, what makes you so passionate about it? You talked about your love for it at the beginning, and what makes you excited about e-commerce in the future?
Yeah, I think initially the way that I fell into this industry was through coincidence. I had a friend who had another friend who owned an agency in Christchurch in the South Island of New Zealand. I got introduced to him. I had always been interested in tech. I had always been interested in the internet from the very, very early days of the internet. I remember when I was even in high school and the internet was starting to become a thing. Email was becoming common. AOL was becoming common. Hotmail was becoming common. The internet was really, it was still in its absolute nascency at that stage, and I'm definitely dating myself here. But I knew even then, I could see that this was going to be a world-changing technology. I could never have predicted to the degree that it was going to be world-changing, but I knew even when I first moved from America to New Zealand, and I was using this little tiny application called Net2 Phone, and it was a phone app that you could install on your computer. You loaded it up with credit, and you could call via VoIP, and it was pennies per minute versus calling from a landline in New Zealand to a landline or even a cell phone in the United States were measured in dollars per minute. And I could just see even then that these small killer apps that people almost couldn't live without, and desktop productivity was in its infancy, but I could see that changing the world because my father used to own a typewriter sales and repair and maintenance business, like literally the old Selectric typewriters. And then latterly he owned a computer store. And so I saw the transition away from typewriters to desktop publishing software and document management software. And so I saw the writing on the wall really early on, but I didn't know how I would be able to break into this space. And I wasn't a programmer, I wasn't a developer, so I didn't want to go into the development space, but I knew this was going to be a game changer, and I knew it was going to be a game changer for business. And because I grew up in a family where my father owned his own business for my whole life, I knew that I wanted to become an entrepreneur in the space. I knew I wanted to contribute to the space. And then when e-commerce started to become a little more common, and then I got to work with this guy who owned an e-commerce agency, development agency, building e-commerce websites, that was just, it felt like an absolute no-brainer to me. And so whilst I came into the industry through some coincidence and some happy pairings of people, mutual friends, I think I was almost destined to always be here. This feels like my life's journey, and it's been a more than 20-year journey for me now. And I just literally cannot imagine doing anything else. With the transformative nature of digital and e-commerce has just absolutely completely changed how we engage as mercantilists. Basically, it's completely changed the concept of being a merchant, and I absolutely love that. And like I said, I can't imagine doing anything else.
It definitely has. That's a great answer. Yeah, I'm definitely excited to see the future of the space. And while it was unplanned, I'm thrilled to be a participating in the industry as well.
It's awesome to have you. Thank you so much for coming on the pod. Look forward to hopefully getting you back on maybe in another 12, 18, 24 months, seeing how you guys have grown, seeing if you've moved back to that digital first model, and just seeing how you guys evolve, because it sounds like you got a really exciting technology and product on your hands. So thank you very much, Max. Look forward to having you on again soon.
Thanks for having me, Jason.
Are you a merchant or software vendor that is focused on e-commerce or omnichannel? Then head over to greenwoodconsulting.net to see how we can help you scale your business.